My name is Imam Yusuf Carrington. I live in Detroit, Michigan, where the skyline is scarred with ghosts of steel and hope. I serve at a modest masjid tucked between the forgotten remnants of old auto shops and liquor stores. Most of my congregation are second-generation Arab Americans, West Africans, and a few lost converts looking for gravity in a weightless world. You could say I was a man of duty. I performed the prayers, gave Friday khutbahs, visited the sick, and buried the dead. I quoted the Quran with precision, recited du'as with emotion, and taught my students about purity, about tawheed, about submission. On the outside, I wore peace like a robe. But inside? I hadn't felt the trembling intimacy of God's presence in years. Faith had become architecture. And yet I didn't see it, until that night. It was the night after Thanksgiving. My wife and kids had gone to her mother's house in Grand Rapids. I stayed behind, citing community obligations, but really, I wanted silence. I told myself I'd use the time for worship. Maybe even stay the night at the masjid. So after Isha prayer, I locked the doors, turned off the main lights, and sat alone beneath the flickering green glow of the mihrab. There was something heavy in the air that night, like a pressure behind the eyes. The silence didn't feel clean, it felt pregnant, almost too quiet, as if the building itself was holding its breath. I sat cross-legged on the carpet, trying to begin dhikr. But every verse I repeated felt hollow, bouncing off the walls of a heart I hadn't visited in years. I thought about the man I once was in seminary, how my heart used to burn during tahajjud. Now my voice trembled not with awe, but with doubt. I laid my forehead on the carpet. Allahumma, I began, then stopped. The words caught in my throat like dust. That's when I felt it. A vibration. Deep. Low. Like something moving beneath the floorboards. At first I thought it was a passing truck, but the ground didn't shake, my soul did. I sat up quickly. The mosque was empty, but the air felt thick, viscous. And then I heard something. A sound. Not outside. Not even in the room. Inside me. A voice that wasn't a voice, more like a presence speaking in my bones. Do you think you know me? I froze. Who's there? I said aloud, my voice cracking. I stood up, heart pounding, looking around the prayer hall. Nothing. No shadows, no tricks of the light. But I knew it wasn't imagination. I'd spoken with enough madmen and mystics to know the difference. I backed away slowly and made wudu again, trying to cleanse the unease. I returned and began 2 rak'ahs. During sujud I whispered, Ya Rab, if this is from you, show me what I need to see. But protect me, protect me. The instant I said it, everything changed. The lights went out. All of them. Not a power outage. The digital clocks on the walls still glowed. But the light of the world switched off. And then, I wasn't in Detroit anymore. I don't know how to describe it. One moment I was in sujud, my forehead on the carpet, and the next I was falling, not through space, but through meaning itself. Through the illusions that hold the world together. No stars. No earth. Just a chasm of silence that pulled at my insides. I saw shapes. Shadows that bled, reaching for me with hands made of memory. Faces of people I'd buried. Faces I hadn't forgiven. And voices whispering. You prayed with your lips, but your heart was asleep. You loved the mosque more than the one it was built for. You taught others how to surrender, but you never truly bowed. I screamed. I tried to say the Shahida, but it felt like my tongue had been removed. My thoughts unraveled. I was unmade. And then, a light. Not white. Not golden. Something living, pulsing, almost conscious in itself. The shadows recoiled. From the center of this light, something moved toward me. A man? No, more than a man. His presence was not weight, it was meaning. He walked without moving. His face. I couldn't see it clearly, and yet I knew it bore both suffering and peace. His eyes, if they were eyes, looked through me, and every part of me trembled. And then he spoke. You called on God. But would you recognize him if he stood before you? I fell to my knees in that place beyond places. And in that moment, I realized this was not a dream. This was judgment without warning. This was a mercy wrapped in terror. The man extended his hand. Come! There is more you must see. His hand hovered over mine, not made of flesh, but woven from something eternal. I didn't want to touch it. I wanted to run. But there was nowhere to run. Not in this place. Not in whatever layer of reality this was. My hand, trembling like a leaf in winter wind, reached out. When our fingers met, a fire ignited, not pain, but recognition. A terrible, beautiful unraveling. It was like every cell of my body suddenly remembered something it had always known but never dared admit. That he was real. That he had been calling long before I learned to speak. The scenery around us shifted. The black void melted into a desert. But not a normal one. The sand here was made of words, ancient words in Aramaic, Hebrew, Arabic, even Greek. They blew around us like ash, carried by a wind that whispered every name of God I'd ever heard, and many I hadn't. In the distance, there stood a tree without leaves, yet it bled like a wounded animal. Beneath it, crosses. Dozens of them. But at the center, one stood taller, darker, older than the others. I turned to the man beside me. You're him, I said. The words felt fragile in my mouth. He nodded. I am called by many names, he said. But in this land, they knew me as Jesus. I felt like falling. I had spent years teaching about Isa ibn Maryam, peace be upon him, as a prophet, a servant of God, but not this. Not this living storm of compassion and sorrow, standing beside me with eyes like oceans and hands that still bore the memory of nails. You're not supposed to be, I began. He turned his gaze on me, and I fell silent. Not because he was angry, but because he was too holy for excuses. You believed in my birth, but you denied my burden. You honored my mother, but ignored my message. You feared your own doubts more than you feared God. I didn't know I was crying until I tasted salt. Then I asked the question that burned in my throat. Why are you showing me this? I am Muslim. This isn't my theology. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw his face fully. And in his face, I saw every prayer I'd ever prayed, even the ones I forgot. I saw my mother lighting a candle when I was sick as a child. I saw a homeless man I once gave a coat to. I saw every moment when my heart was open, and he was near, but I didn't know it was him. I'm not here to change your label, he said. I'm here to change your heart. The sand began to rise, forming images in the air. I saw the Prophet Muhammad, walking through the streets of Medina. I saw Moses parting the sea. I saw Mary giving birth alone, crying out in agony. All of them connected, like rivers flowing to the same ocean. I saw that prayer was not a ritual, it was a doorway. And every time I had truly prayed, not with my tongue, but with my hunger, I had been drawing closer to this same light. To God. To Him. And then came the most painful vision of all. I saw myself, in the mosque, giving sermons about mercy, while secretly judging the broken souls who came through our doors. I saw how many times I had mistaken the form of faith for the presence of God. You knew the map, Jesus said, but you forgot the destination. I collapsed. I don't know what to believe anymore, I whispered. He knelt beside me. Then believe this, he said gently, that God hears. That every soul that cries out, even once, is seen. That you are not lost. Not yet. He stood and began to walk away. Wait, I called. Please. What am I supposed to do now? He turned, silhouetted against the sky that had no sun. Pray. But not as you have. Pray like a drowning man. Pray like a child in the dark. Pray as if the breath in your lungs was your last, and the name of God your only light. And then, he was gone. I was alone in the sand. Alone with my shame, my awe, my shattering. Then the sand began to rise again, swallowing me, pulling me back toward the world I had come from. Back toward the body lying in sujud in a Detroit masjid. And as I returned, one final whisper followed me through the veil. You asked to see God? You saw Him. Now live like it. I gasped awake. My chest convulsed as if someone had punched the air back into me. I lay flat on the cold carpet of the masjid, drenched in sweat, my forehead still pressed to the floor. Everything looked the same, the fluorescent lights above, the familiar smell of oud and dust, the hum of an old radiator in the corner. But I was not the same. I sat up slowly, checking my pulse, my breath, the shaking in my hands. I was alive, that much was clear. But part of me had stayed behind, in that other world, with him. The man of light. The one I had never dared believe could be who he was, and yet, who had known me more intimately than I knew myself. I stumbled into the bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My face looked pale, hollowed. My eyes, something in them had shifted. Like they'd seen behind the curtain, and didn't know how to unsee. I didn't sleep that night. I walked the masjid in silence until far, unsure whether I was going mad or had just been chosen for something terrible and beautiful. I didn't speak to anyone afterward. I didn't tell my wife. For 3 days, I wandered the city. I sat in parks. I walked past churches. I stared at the cross in front of St. Agnes Catholic Church, a crumbling cathedral wrapped in ivy and time. And every time I tried to pray, the words tasted different. On the 4th day, I couldn't bear it anymore. I called a man I hadn't spoken to in years, Isaiah Bloom, a former Christian pastor who had converted to Islam a decade ago and now ran a shelter downtown. He was a mystic in his own way, half Sufi, half poet, the kind of soul who never flinched at the supernatural. We met in the back room of the shelter, sitting on folding chairs among stacks of canned goods. Something happened to me, I told him. He didn't interrupt. Just nodded slowly. I think I died, I said. And I saw him. Isaiah didn't even blink. Jesus? I nodded. He leaned back and folded his arms. Describe him. I did. I told him everything. The desert of words. The tree that bled. The light that was alive. I told him what the man said about prayer, about hearts, about how I knew him before I knew him. Isaiah closed his eyes and whispered something under his breath. Then he looked at me and said, You were given Aryuyahak. A true vision. And maybe more than that. You didn't see a symbol. You saw the mercy that walks. But why? I said. Why would he come to me? I'm a Muslim. I don't worship him. Isaiah smiled faintly. Maybe because you pray. Maybe because he's not here to be worshipped, but to point you back to God in a way that shakes you to your bones. We sat in silence. Then he said something I never forgot. There are veils that fall from the eyes. And there are veils that fall from the soul. When both fall, you don't return the same. You return dangerous. To darkness. To lies. Even to yourself. I began to cry. Not from guilt. From clarity. From a grief I didn't know I had, grief for all the years I had prayed without presence, for all the people I had failed to love because I was busy being correct. That night, I went back to the masjid. But I didn't preach. I sat in the back row, watching the people pray. The single mother. The old man with arthritis. The teenager with headphones still around his neck. I saw them all, and I wept. Because I saw now what I had never seen before. Each of them was carrying a story. Each of them was already burning with God's attention. And then, something strange happened. An elderly woman approached me after prayer, someone I had never spoken to before. She said, Imam, I don't know why I'm saying this, but last night I dreamed of a man in white light. He said to tell you, the journey isn't over. Don't stop at revelation. Walk into transformation. I nearly collapsed again. That night I prayed. But not like I used to. I didn't ask for things. I simply said, Here I am. Break what needs to break. Burn what needs to burn. But don't leave me! And the silence that followed was not empty. It was full. I was never the same after that night. But I didn't become what people think. I didn't convert. I didn't leave Islam. I simply woke up. There's a difference between repeating the names of God and meeting Him. And when you meet Him, not as an idea, but as a fire that sees through you, you're reborn, whether you want to be or not. Weeks passed. The masjid board asked me why my sermons had changed. I wasn't quoting as many scholars. I paused longer between verses. I spoke less like a man delivering truth, and more like a man searching for it, publicly, vulnerably. It made some people uncomfortable. Others wept and said, "This is the first time I've heard God in years." One Friday, I gave a khutbah titled, "The Prophet You Forgot, the One Inside You." I spoke of the prayer that trembles, not the prayer that performs. I spoke of Jesus, not as the Christian son, not even as just the Muslim prophet, but as the one who suffers with us, the one who reminds us what mercy costs. And I told them what he told me. You knew the map. But you forgot the destination. Some walked out. Some stayed and knelt in tears. But I no longer measured truth by approval. One night, months later, I stood in the empty masjid again. Same carpet. Same silence. But it didn't frighten me anymore. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Are you still there?" And the answer came, not in a voice, but in a warmth. A presence. Like a hand on my back I couldn't see. Like breath within breath. I never left. But now you know where to look. I began to weep, not with sorrow, but with release. And then I began to pray. Not to be good. Not to be saved. Not to be right. Just to be with Him. There is something I must say to you, reader, whoever you are. Because if you've come this far, it means a part of you is hungry. A part of you remembers, even if your mind has forgotten. I saw Jesus. And He did not ask me to change my religion. He asked me to change my heart. And I believe this with everything in me now. Salvation isn't about labels. It's about surrender. Not to men. Not to systems. But to the fire of God that waits behind the veil. We are dying of dryness. Of performance. Of cold rituals and loud certainties. But there is still a river. And it flows through prayer. Real prayer. The kind that bleeds. So I beg you, don't wait until your chest is cracked open like mine was. Don't wait for death to pull you into light. Start now. Right now. Fall to your knees, in whatever language you know, and whisper. I don't know who you are. But I want you. Find me. Break me. Save me. Because He will. I know. He found me. And I've never been alone since.